Before we get started, make sure to subscribe to our channel and click the bell icon so you never miss an update. I was on top of the world when Andrea said yes. After 4 years together, I knew she was the one. We had something special. At least that's what I believed. Every little thing about her made me fall in love all over again. The way her eyes lit up when she was excited. How she'd grabbed my hand while we walked. The way she could make me feel like the luckiest guy on the planet with just a glance. We wasted no time planning the wedding. Andrea took the lead on most of the details, and I didn't mind. She was excited about it, and I was just happy to be marrying her. One night, as we were going over the guest list, she casually mentioned something that at the time seemed harmless. Brianna and the girls are planning a trip to Miami for my Bachelorette weekend. She said, smiling. Miami? I raised an eyebrow. It's nothing crazy. She reassured me, her fingers brushing against mine. Just some girl time, sun cocktails, and maybe a little dancing. I chuckled. Just don't let them convince you to move there. She laughed and leaned in to kiss me. You worry too much. I love you, Logan. Nothing's going to change that. I believed her. The morning of her trip, I helped her pack. We joked around and everything felt normal. She teased me about crashing their weekend, but I just smiled and told her I trusted her. We drove to the airport and I kissed her goodbye. Watching her disappear through the security gates, I had no idea that it would be the last time I looked at her without suspicion in my heart. The first night, I barely thought about it. I sent Andrea a good night text, and she replied almost instantly. Good night, babe. Mississippi. You all ready? That was enough to put me at ease. She was safe. She was thinking about me, and everything was fine. But the next day, something felt off. I called her in the afternoon just to check in. No answer. I figured she was at the beach. Maybe her phone was in her bag. No big deal. A couple of hours passed. I sent her a text. Hey, hope you're having fun. Call me when you get a chance. Nothing. Evening rolled around. Still nothing. Andrea was never the type to ignore her phone, even when she was out with friends. She always took a second to reply. A quick text, a voice note, something. But now, radio silence. By the time it hit 10 p.m., I had this uncomfortable feeling in my gut. I tried calling again. Straight to voicemail. Now I was worried. Was she okay? Did something happen, or was it something else? I forced myself to shake off the paranoia. Maybe she had one too many drinks, fell asleep early, and forgot to charge her phone. It wasn't until the next morning that my phone finally buzzed. I grabbed it instantly. Andrea. I answered, my voice tight. Andrea? She sounded groggy, like she had just woken up. Hey, babe. Sorry I fell asleep early last night. We were exhausted from the beach. I exhaled, trying to shake off my unease. We talked for a bit. Nothing deep. Just small talk. It felt normal. Almost enough to make me forget the weird silence from the night before. Then, just as we were about to hang up, I heard it. A man's voice, quick, muffled, unmistakable. Then the line went dead. I froze. What the hell was that? I called her back immediately. It rang a few times before she picked up. Hey, she said, her voice suddenly more alert. Who was that? My tone was sharp. More accusing than I meant it to be. What? She asked, acting like she didn't know what I was talking about. I heard a guy's voice before the call cut off. I said, my heart hammering. Who's with you? She paused for a second. Just a second, too long before she answered. Oh, she said quickly. That was just the hotel staff. They were dropping off breakfast. I frowned. Hotel staff? Yeah. They come around in the morning offering room service stuff. You know how it is. Something about her tone was off. It was rushed. Like she wanted to get through the explanation as fast as possible. You sure? I pressed my chest tightening. She let out a sigh, and when she spoke again there was an edge to her voice. Logan, relax. I'm in my room with my friends. You're being paranoid. I wanted to believe her. I really did. So I swallowed down the doubt, creeping up my throat, and forced myself to let it go. All right, I mumbled. Have fun. She gave a half-hearted. Love you. Before hanging up, I stared at my phone for a long time. Something wasn't right, but I wasn't ready to see what was right in front of me. Andrea came back from Miami the next evening. I drove to the airport, feeling that familiar mix of excitement and relief. I had missed her, but the moment she stepped out of the terminal, something felt off. She looked the same. Sun-kissed, glowing. Still the woman I loved. But when she hugged me, it didn't feel the same. It wasn't tight, warm, or full of excitement. It was quick, almost obligatory. And when she kissed me, her lips barely lingered. Hey, I said, searching her face. How was Miami? She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. Amazing. I needed that trip so bad. Yeah. I forced a grin. Anything crazy happen? She laughed, brushing her hair behind her ear. Just girl stuff. Drinking, dancing. A little too much sun. Nothing wild. I nodded, but something inside me was uneasy. I chalked it up to paranoia. Maybe I was still overthinking the weird phone call. Maybe I was just being insecure. So I pushed it down on the drive home. She was quieter than usual. Normally, Andrea would talk nonstop after trips, telling me every little detail, but now she mostly stared out the window, scrolling through her phone. When we got home, she barely unpacked before flopping onto the couch. Texting. She was smiling at her screen, fingers moving fast. Brianna. I asked, keeping my tone light. What? She glanced up, confused. You texting Brianna? She blinked like she had to process the question. Oh, yeah. Just catching up. Catching up. She just spent the whole weekend with her. I didn't say anything, but that uneasy feeling in my gut started to grow. The changes didn't hit all at once. They crept in slow and quiet, like a crack spreading across glass. She was always on her phone now, not just scrolling, texting constantly. Her face would light up with a grin, fingers flying across the screen. And when I walked into the room, she'd tilt the phone slightly away as if it were second nature. And then she started going out more than usual. Girls' night became a regular thing. Twice a week, sometimes 3. Where are you going tonight? I asked one evening as she stood in front of the mirror, applying lipstick. Out with the girls. She said casually, dabbing at her lips again. She gave me a look through the mirror. What's that supposed to mean? I exhaled slowly. It just feels like we haven't spent much time together lately. She rolled her eyes. Oh, come on, Logan. I see you every day. That's not the same. And you know it. She turned, hands on her hips. So what? I'm supposed to just stay home all the time? I kept my voice calm. I'm not saying that, Andrea. I'm saying something's different since Miami. She scoffed, shaking her head. Oh my God. Not this again. I stared at her, trying to read her. Was she hiding something? Or was I just imagining it? Are we going to fight every time I go out now? She asked, grabbing her purse. I sighed, rubbing my temples. No, just never mind. Good. She muttered and walked out the door. I sat there for a long time, staring at the empty space where she stood. Something wasn't right, and I was going to find out what it was. That night when Andrea came home, I was waiting for her in the living room. She walked in, tossing her keys on the table like nothing was wrong. But then I caught the scent. It wasn't her perfume. It was cologne, a man's cologne. Where were you? I asked, my voice tight. She barely looked at me. I told you with the girls. I stood up, blocking her path. Then why do you smell like a guy? Her face flashed with something. Guilt. Panic. I couldn't tell. But then, just as quickly, she covered it up. Oh, for God's sake, Logan. Some guy at the bar must have brushed past me. Are we really doing this? I wanted to believe her, but I couldn't. The next morning, Andrea was in the shower when her phone buzzed on the nightstand. I wasn't even trying to look, but my eyes flicked to the screen. A message from Scott. My stomach dropped. I stared at the name, my mind racing. Who the hell is Scott? Without thinking, my hand moved on its own, reaching for the phone. But before I could grab it, the shower turned off. I quickly set it back down and stepped away just as Andrea walked out, wrapped in a towel, steam curling around her. I kept my expression neutral. She glanced at her phone, then at me. What are you doing? I shrugged. Nothing. Just grabbing my wallet. She didn't question it, but she picked up her phone and quickly swiped the screen. I didn't miss the way her lips pressed together. She was hiding something. I just didn't know how bad it was yet. That night, after Andrea fell asleep, I made my move. I sat in bed, heart pounding, staring at her phone on the nightstand. I didn't know the passcode, but there was another way. Carefully, I lifted Andrea's hand, holding my breath as I pressed her fingertip against the sensor. The screen unlocked. A shaky exhale left my lips. My hands were trembling, but I forced myself to stay steady. I couldn't risk waking her. Not now. Gripping the phone tightly, I slid out of bed and made my way to the living room. My footsteps silent against the hardwood floor. I sat down on the couch, the only light coming from the screen in my hands. At first, it was just normal messages. Friends. Coworkers. Nothing suspicious. But then I found his name. Scott. I hesitated, a cold weight settling in my stomach. Then I tapped on the conversation and my world fell apart. The messages were playful at first. Two playful inside jokes, lingering compliments. The kind of banter that made my blood run cold. But as I scrolled further, my worst fears became reality. Photos. Videos. Andrea in bed with him. My grip on the phone tightened. My breathing turned shallow, but I kept scrolling even as my vision blurred at the edges. And then, just when I thought I had seen the worst of it, I found more video with another man. It wasn't just Scott. It was him and someone else. Together with her. I swallowed hard. My throat dry as sandpaper. These weren't just flirty texts. This wasn't some meaningless mistake. This went all the way back to Miami. The weekend of her bachelorette party. The same trip where she told me she was too tired to answer my calls. The same weekend, I had ignored the sick feeling in my gut and convinced myself everything was fine. But it hadn't stopped there. Scott had come to our city, and the night she told me she was going out with her friends, she was with him sneaking around behind my back while I sat at home like a fool, believing every lie that left her lips. My stomach twisted. I gritted my teeth. My grip on the phone, so tight it felt like it might shatter in my hands. Then, without thinking, I did the only thing I could. I forwarded the photos and videos to my phone. Once the transfer was complete, I went back and deleted the entire conversation from hers. She wouldn't know I had seen it. Not yet, because I wasn't going to just confront her. I was going to expose her. The next morning, I put my plan into motion. Andrea moved around the house like nothing was wrong, completely unaware that I knew everything. When I casually suggested inviting her parents over for dinner, she didn't even hesitate. Yeah, sure, she said, barely looking up from her phone. She didn't suspect a thing. That night, as we sat around the table, I made small talk, pretending everything was normal. Then, when the moment was just right, I took out my phone, connected it to the TV, and pressed play. The screen lit up. One by one, the photos and videos appeared undeniable proof of her betrayal. Andrea tangled in bedsheets with Scott and the other man, laughing in dimly lit rooms, moving, touching, doing things that made my stomach churn. The air in the room grew thick, suffocating. Her mother gasped. Her father's face turned red with rage. Andrea froze. What? What is this? She stammered. You tell me, I said coldly. Her father stood up, his fist clenched. Andrea? What the hell is this? Tears welled in her eyes. Logan, please. No. I cut her off. You don't get to beg. You chose this. Her father's voice was filled with disgust. I raised you better than this. Her mother just sat there, shaking her head in shame. Andrea turned to me, desperate now. Logan, I made a mistake. I let out a hollow laugh. A mistake. I gestured toward the screen. That's not a mistake. That's who you are. Her breath hitched. She knew. She knew there was no coming back from this. I stood, my voice steady. Pack your things. The wedding is off, and I want you out tonight. Her father exhaled sharply, his face hard. You heard him. Get up. Start packing. Andrea's lips parted like she wanted to argue, to plead. But no words came. She had destroyed everything, and now she had to live with it. That night, she packed her bags in silence. No more excuses. No more lies. Just the quiet acceptance of what she had done. When she walked out the door, I didn't stop her. And just like that, she was gone. Months passed. Life moved on, and so did I. At first, it was hard undoing 4 years of memories, adjusting to the silence, filling the empty spaces she once occupied. But over time, the pain dulled, replaced by something else. Clarity. Then one evening, there was a knock at my door. I wasn't expecting anyone. When I opened it, my breath hitched for just a second. Andrea. She looked different. Tired. Worn down. Her eyes were red-rimmed, tears threatening to spill. Logan, please give me another chance, she whispered, her voice shaky. I was stupid. I made a mistake. I didn't respond. She swallowed hard, her eyes searching mine. I tried dating, she continued, her voice breaking, but nothing lasted. No one felt right. You were always the one. And now I finally realize it. I just stared at her. The woman who once meant everything to me was now a stranger. The desperation in her voice, the regret in her eyes. It didn't matter anymore. I wasn't angry. I wasn't sad. I felt nothing. And that's when I knew. I exhaled, my voice calm. Leave and don't ever come back. Her lips parted like she wanted to argue, to plead. But she saw it in my face. It was over. Without another word, I shut the door on her. On the past for good. And for the first time in a long time, I was free. Thank you for watching.